Across the country, there are 2,048 auctions scheduled to take place this week. New South Wales will host 780 auctions, with 642 of them in Sydney, and that's up 33% when compared to the same week last year. Victoria will hold 863 auctions. Most of those are in Melbourne. Queensland has 222 auctions scheduled, with 95 of them in regional areas. South Australia has 112 auctions scheduled. Western Australia, Tasmania and the Northern Territory have 25 auctions collectively, and the ACT will hold 46 auctions. Let's take a look at the most viewed properties going to auction this week. Top property in New South Wales is 115 Coronation Road, Borkham Hills. This 4-bedroom home in Sydney's northwest sits on about 700 square metres. Price guide is $1.4 million. Topping the list in Victoria is a 2-bedroom townhouse at 38 Overend Street, Brunswick. This Melbourne property is very close to Lygon Street and the tram line that takes you to the CBD. Price guide is $650,000 to $750,000. Top property in Queensland is 48 Michelle Drive, Currumbin Waters, which is pretty close to the Gold Coast Airport. This 5-bedroom mansion comes with a pool and is perfect for entertaining. Topping the list in South Australia is 45 Grove Street, Unley Park, which is just south of the Adelaide CBD. This sandstone 4-bedder was built in 1905 and has a price guide of about $1.5 million. And the top property in Western Australia is 6 Cascade Avenue, Dianella, which is north of the Perth CBD. This 3-bedder with a pool is being advertised as an ideal knockdown rebuild. And the most viewed property on the REA Group website this week is 57 Old Mount Barker Road, Stirling, South Australia. This massive home sits on about 9 acres of land. It's 23 minutes drive southeast of the Adelaide CBD, very close to the Mount Lofty Botanic Gardens. The 6-bedroom, 5-bathroom home has a raised vantage point that looks out over the surrounding valley with lots of lush bushland around. Inside, the home has cathedral-like ceilings, which are 6.7 metres high. The large kitchen also includes a butler's pantry and a wine cellar. There's indoor and outdoor entertaining areas and a gym, plus a swimming pool and spa bath. There's also a 5-car garage, secure front gate with intercom, main water and water tanks, plus air conditioning and 3-phase power to the shed. Inspections open tomorrow at 1 p.m. Adelaide time. For more on property, I caught up with Paul Ryan from REA Group a little earlier.
Yeah, we've got more than 2,000 auctions scheduled this weekend. That's pretty similar to what we saw this time last year, which is what we've seen in the market. We've seen a big rebound in market activity. Throughout May, we saw a similar number of sales as we saw in 2022, whereas earlier in the year, we were tracking about 20% below last year. So the market's really recovered as home prices have increased.
And auction clearance rates, they seem to be historically at pretty high levels still.
Yeah, very much so. We've seen auction clearance rates above 70% in Sydney and Melbourne. That points to further continued price growth in both of those cities.
Do you think the Reserve Bank will be a little bit worried about how strong our housing market is right now when they're trying to slow our economy by raising interest rates?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the RBA pointed to rising home prices. One of the things that's pointing to the economy being stronger than they expected. I mean, we saw the labour market figures this week that showed unemployment decreased. All of these point to, I mean, this is a year after interest rates started to increase. We would have expected the economy to start slowing more rapidly than it has. And so that probably points to maybe more interest rate increases than we were expecting.
Yeah, this Sunday on Business Weekend, we've got a special dedicated to the recession and comparing it to the one in the 1990s. Do you think Australia is potentially getting close to recession levels for our economy?
No, not at all. That's not what the data is not showing that at all. That's the risk here is that the RBA over-tightens and that pushes the economy very quickly into that cycle of people losing their jobs. That decreases demand, which leads to more people losing their jobs. But we haven't seen any evidence of that so far.
Paul, rental markets, it looks like we've started to get some good news for renters with vacancy rates unchanged in May, so they're not getting any worse.
Yep. That's unfortunately the good news for renters. It's been bad news for so long for renters, but some good news is that it isn't getting worse. We've seen some slight improvements, particularly in Sydney in May, and hopefully that shows what we're seeing is higher rents have brought more investors into the market, more rental properties, means it's slightly easier for renters to find properties, and hopefully that continues throughout this year.
But we have seen some pretty big increases in rents from landlords every 12 months. They seem to be really cranking them up over the past couple of months. Do you expect that sort of behaviour from landlords to continue? I guess their costs are going up with inflation, so they say they just have to pass it all on.
Yeah, unfortunately, conditions, the demand and supply conditions in the rental market are still really tight. I mean, we've got rental vacancy rates of around 1.4% nationally. That's still really difficult to find a rental. There's still lots of renters out there searching for properties. And so we're seeing advertised rents increase at around 10% a year at the moment. And unfortunately, that's going to keep continuing to increase, maybe not at those rates, but at quite high rates, higher than people's incomes are going up for some time yet until the market rebalances.
This week, we also got the migration and population growth numbers for last year, showing our population was up almost 2% in 2022. Migration played a lot to do with that. But all those new migrants coming to Australia, they obviously need to find a place to live. Is that just making the housing situation even tougher?
It certainly is. There's a lot of catch-up migration for people that would have come to Australia throughout the pandemic. So there's a bit higher migration than we have seen. And yeah, that's certainly one factor into why particularly rental markets at the moment are so difficult for a lot of renters. But I think we were seeing high rates of migration before the pandemic, and rental markets were pretty placid. We were seeing flat rents for several years in a lot of locations. So it's not just migration, it's also how households have reorganised themselves since the pandemic. People want to live in smaller households. And part of the solution to this, or the response to this, will be that households will reorganise themselves again. People will take on more share houses, people will take on housemates, things like that will be part of the solution, which is maybe not what renters want. But with rents going up this quickly, some will be forced into those situations.
And the other thing, are we starting to see a recovery in investors coming back into the property market and bidding for homes at auctions on the weekend? Is that a new thing again?
Yeah, that's those increases in rents have brought more investors back into the market. We're seeing the rental stock grow now at similar rates as we saw before the pandemic. So the rental market's kind of getting back to a normal balance. Throughout the pandemic, we were seeing investors sell properties at really, really high rates. In fact, in a lot of cities, selling investment properties at faster rates than new investors were coming into the market. So there are actually fewer rental properties. That has now reversed. We're seeing investors in the finance data are about a third of housing finance, which is what we saw before the pandemic.
Okay, so they're really coming back in a big way. And just lastly, property prices. I know they've been up for the last 5 months in a row. What's your tip for June?
Well, auction clearance rates above 70% point to further increases. Housing prices tend to have a lot of momentum, so it looks like prices are going to keep growing.
Paul Ryan from REA Group, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much.